Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. If you think your life is complicated, wait until you hear what happened when my wife said I couldn't make her happy, and her best friend looked me dead in the eye and said, "Then let me try." Let me be very clear, I didn't cheat. I didn't flirt. I didn't even blink wrong. I just stood there, in the middle of our kitchen, holding a coffee mug with a chip on the rim, wondering if I had just stepped into a reality show without signing a release form. The entire thing started with an avocado. Meredith, my wife, had been in a mood all week. And when I say mood, I mean the kind where she sighs before you even speak. That morning, I sliced an avocado for her toast. No big deal. I do it all the time. But this time, she stared at the plate like I'd served her a dead rat. "Why do you always do this?" she muttered. "Do what?" I asked. "Try so hard to make me happy." I blinked. "Isn't that what husbands do?" She gave a dry laugh. "Maybe good ones. But you just overdo everything. It's exhausting. It's like you're auditioning for a role you already failed at." I stood frozen, toast in one hand, heart collapsing in the other. I didn't fight back. I never do. I just mumbled something like, "Sorry you feel that way." And I sat down, trying to remember if she'd always been this cold or if I had just stopped feeling the frostbite. Then, the universe added gasoline to the fire. The doorbell rang. I opened it, and there was Brenna. Meredith's best friend. Same age, same dry humor, same exhausting confidence that made everyone else feel like background noise. She walked in without asking, as usual. "Hey, Meredith," she called out. "You forgot your charger at mine." Then she saw my face. I must have looked like a kicked puppy because she stopped mid-sentence and frowned. "What happened?" Meredith, with zero shame, yelled from the living room, told him he couldn't make me happy. I braced for Brenna to laugh. Or nod. Or agree. But instead, she stepped into the kitchen, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Then let me try." I thought I misheard. Meredith definitely didn't mishear. "You're kidding me, right?" she barked, standing up with that wildfire expression I've seen way too many times. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Brenna didn't flinch. "What's wrong with you? This guy bends over backwards for you. You treat him like something stuck to your shoe." I stood in stunned silence as the two of them went at it like I wasn't even there. "You've lost your damn mind," Meredith snapped. "You can't just." "I can do whatever I want," Brenna said, folding her arms. "And if he's really that worthless to you, maybe someone else should show him what being appreciated feels like." That's when Meredith threw the plate. No joke. Full-on plate across the room. Missed the wall and hit the plant. The poor ficus never recovered. She stormed upstairs, screaming something about betrayal and ruined boundaries and how she was done with this circus. Brenna looked at me. And I, being the emotionally stunted, conflict-avoidant man that I am, said the dumbest thing possible. "Do you want some toast?" She laughed. Laughed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely invisible. But I also had no idea what kind of chaos that single moment had just unleashed. Because when a marriage breaks, sometimes it's not a clean snap. Sometimes it fractures in the strangest, most unbelievable ways. And this was only the first crack. The plate didn't shatter. It bounced. That felt unfair. Everything else in my life was cracking at the seams, my confidence, my marriage, my sanity, but the damn plate survived like it was mocking me. Meredith's footsteps thundered upstairs, each stomp another reminder of how small I'd become in this house. I stood there in the kitchen, arms limp at my sides, as Brenna picked up the broken pot our ficus used to live in and quietly set it on the counter. She didn't speak right away, and I didn't either. What do you say after your wife throws a ceramic missile across the room because her best friend offered to make you smile? You really didn't see that coming? Brenna finally asked, brushing soil off her jacket like this was a regular Tuesday. I shook my head. I didn't even see you coming. She smirked, not out of arrogance but something softer, pity maybe. I told her years ago. If she didn't want you, someone else would. You told her that? After your 5th anniversary. She mocked the photo album you made her, remember? Of course I remembered. I spent weeks printing photos, writing little notes under each one. Meredith looked at it once and said, "Did you make this in 3rd grade?" That was the first time I cried in the garage. Brenna sat on the bar stool and exhaled slowly. You're not an exciting guy, Franklin. But you're warm. You show up. You give. That should be enough. It wasn't. Not for Meredith. Not anymore. And the worst part? I was starting to believe her. I'm not the man with a six-pack or a booming laugh. I don't host dinner parties or talk about stocks. I watch documentaries about deep-sea fish and get excited about USB hubs with extra ports. I've been told I have a resting confused face. So no, I wasn't surprised she stopped being proud to introduce me. What did surprise me, though, was what happened that night. Meredith didn't come back down. Not for dinner. Not to scream more. Not to explain. She stayed upstairs. At some point I heard her pacing, then the click of a lock. Then silence. Like a vacuum sucked her out of the house. Brenna stayed until it got dark. We didn't talk much. We sat in the weird quiet, drinking cold coffee and occasionally looking at each other like, what did we just do? She left around 9:30. Said, text me if she throws anything else. I managed a weak smile. As I closed the door behind her, I caught a glimpse of our wedding photo in the hallway. I was smiling so wide in it, it hurt to look at. Meredith's eyes were sparkling, like she was in on a secret she never shared with me. Now those eyes only held contempt. I tried to sleep, but my brain was doing cartwheels. I kept replaying Brenna's words. You give. That should be enough. What if it never will be? Around 2 a.m., I heard the front door open and close. I sat up, heart pounding. Meredith walked in, barefoot, makeup smudged, holding her heels like weapons. She didn't say anything. Just walked past the living room, paused at the base of the stairs, and muttered, "You and Brenna are disgusting." I stayed seated. Nothing happened. She turned her head, gave me a look so bitter I almost shrank into the couch. Doesn't matter. She wants you. I can see it. She stood up for me. That's all. Exactly, she snapped. And you liked it. I didn't answer. Because she was right. I did like it. I liked being noticed. Defended. Valued. Even if it was by the one person she never expected to turn against her. Meredith climbed the stairs without another word. Her door closed. Mine never did. That was the night I realized something had shifted. Not just between me and her. But inside me. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't waiting for her to apologize. I wasn't crafting texts in my head to fix things. I wasn't thinking about what I did wrong. I was thinking about Brenna. And that terrified me. Because I knew Meredith wasn't done. She was going to fight. And I was the battlefield. The next morning was the kind of quiet you only get after a disaster. Like the air itself was afraid to make noise. I crept downstairs, half expecting broken things or a note or maybe even a suitcase by the door. But everything was in place. Nothing moved. Not even Meredith. Her door was still closed, and I swear I stood outside of it for a solid minute just listening, like a coward checking for a heartbeat before stepping onto a minefield. I made coffee. Extra strong. My hands were shaking. Not from caffeine, from everything else. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Brenna had stirred up, it had detonated something I wouldn't be able to contain. Not anymore. Meredith didn't come down until past noon. She looked immaculate, as always. Hair ironed, makeup in place, dress crisp and cruel. She moved like a statue coming to life. Not once did her eyes meet mine. She poured her coffee, walked right past me, and said, "We need to talk." But not here. I should have asked where. I should have asked why. But instead, I just nodded. Like always. Like the little loyal mutt who follows even when the leash is gone. We ended up in her car. She didn't explain. Just drove. 10 minutes later, we pulled into a parking lot outside a yoga studio I'd never noticed. The sign said "Awakened Balance." I half wondered if this was a setup for a prank show. Then I saw who was waiting outside. A couples therapist. Holding a clipboard. Smiling like he already knew my name. "You ambushed me," I blurted, my voice cracking like a teenager's. Meredith barely glanced at me. "You said you wanted to fix things. This is fixing." I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I followed her in. Because of course I did. The session was worse than anything I imagined. Meredith sat on the couch like a queen giving testimony. She listed my flaws like she was reading from a grocery list. I'm too agreeable. Too boring. Too sensitive. I don't challenge her. I don't activate her ambition. She said I drain her energy, like I'm some kind of emotional mosquito. Then came the final jab. "He's not even jealous, you know," she said to the therapist. "My best friend practically flirts with him to his face and he just smiles. He's either naive or numb. Or both." The therapist turned to me, pen ready. "How does that make you feel, Franklin?" I wanted to laugh. I wanted to say, "I feel like I'm paying you to watch me get stabbed with glitter-covered words." But instead, I said what I always say. "I just want her to be happy." Meredith scoffed so loudly it echoed. The therapist scribbled something down. Probably, client possibly spineless. Check spine later. When we got back in the car, she didn't start the engine. Just sat there gripping the wheel, her knuckles white. "You're not bad, Franklin. You're just, unmemorable." That hit harder than anything she'd said before. I was a ghost in my own marriage. Present, but unseen. Heard, but not listened to. Needed, but not wanted. She dropped me off at the house and drove away before I even shut the door. I stood on the porch, stunned, holding my breath like the sky might fall. It didn't. But someone else showed up instead. Brenna. She was standing at the edge of the walkway, holding a bag of takeout like she somehow knew today would be a disaster. "I brought Chinese," she said. "Figured you'd forget to eat." She wasn't wrong. We sat at the kitchen table. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough. Her expression changed from amused to furious within 5 minutes. "She dragged you to therapy without asking? Like you're some pet project?" "She's trying," I mumbled. "No, Franklin. You're trying. She's maneuvering." Brenna leaned forward. "You know what the worst part is? I warned her years ago. I told her, if she didn't appreciate what she had, she'd lose it. And now she's just daring the world to call her bluff." I looked at her. "And what if someone does call it?" She didn't blink. "Then maybe she'll finally see what she's throwing away." And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not a big change, not a thunderclap or explosion, but something subtle. A weight lifting from a place I didn't know was heavy. Maybe I was done apologizing for loving too softly. Maybe I was done proving I was enough. Maybe, just maybe. Meredith had finally miscalculated. It had been 3 days since the therapy ambush. Meredith barely came home, and when she did, it was with cold breath and shorter words. She started leaving makeup on the bathroom sink again, like a subtle way of reclaiming territory she hadn't visited in weeks. She never said anything about Brenna, and I didn't either. But the silence had changed. Before, it was about control. Now, it was about waiting. She was watching me. Not openly. Not in the way people do when they care. But in the way a person watches a crack in their favorite vase, hoping it won't split further, but too proud to admit it already has. And me? I was just trying to breathe through the weight of it all. Everything I did felt wrong now. Too quiet and I was passive. Too kind and I was desperate. Too distant and I was suspicious. I didn't even feel like a person anymore. I felt like a performance review waiting to be filed. Brenna came by again, not to stir things up, just to check on me. That's how it started, anyway. We were sitting on the back porch. It was raining lightly, and the yard smelled like wet pine needles and guilt. I told her about the therapy session, about the unmemorable comment, and she just sat there, listening like no one had in years. She's right, you know, I finally said, hating the sound of my own voice. I am forgettable. I always have been. Brenna didn't reply right away. She just sipped her drink, then set it down like she was about to challenge me to a duel. Franklin, she said quietly, you're not forgettable. You're suppressed. That word, suppressed, hit me harder than I expected. It felt like a diagnosis. A cruelly accurate one. You shrink yourself to fit her comfort zone. You pause when she breathes wrong. You say sorry for existing in spaces she wants to dominate. That's not forgettable. That's you being trained. She turned to me, and for the first time, I couldn't look away. I think you stopped being seen because you were too afraid of what would happen if you finally stood your ground. I didn't respond. Because I knew she was right. And then Meredith saw us. She wasn't supposed to be home. She was supposed to be at a showing 2 towns over. But suddenly, there she was, standing inside the kitchen, watching us through the window like we were actors in a play she didn't audition for. She didn't storm out. Didn't yell. Just turned, slow and quiet, and disappeared back into the house. I felt the blood drain from my face. I need to go in. Brenna grabbed my wrist gently. You don't owe her an explanation. She left you hanging for years. She can sit with the discomfort for once. But I couldn't. Not yet. I still hadn't learned how to stand upright in a house that trained me to bow. So I went inside. Meredith was in the kitchen, holding a glass of wine like a prop she didn't need. She didn't look at me when she said, she likes you, you know. I didn't answer. She finally turned around. Her face was calm, too calm. Tell me the truth. Have you slept with her? No. Have you wanted to? That one took longer to answer. When I finally whispered, I don't know, Meredith laughed in that hollow, theatrical way she did when things didn't go her way. You've changed, she said. No, I replied. I've just noticed. Noticed what? That I exist. That silenced her. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest. The kind of honest I'd been too cowardly to say for years. She stepped closer, eyes scanning mine like a predator not sure if the prey had just grown claws. So what, you think she's your savior? I shook my head. No. I think she's just the first person in a long time who didn't ask me to apologize for being myself. Meredith didn't slap me. She didn't cry. She didn't even speak. She just turned around and left the room, barefoot, shoulders stiff, like she was carrying the ghost of something that used to matter. That night, I didn't sleep in the bedroom. I didn't sleep on the couch either. I sat in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, realizing something dangerous. The more Meredith tried to punish me with silence, the more I stopped being afraid of it. Because maybe, just maybe, silence was where I found myself again. The next morning, I expected a war. A fight. Screaming. Tears. Maybe even suitcases. But Meredith surprised me. She made breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Even poured orange juice, which she hates. She sat across from me like nothing had happened. As if last night's confrontation had evaporated in her sleep. And maybe that's when I realized her most dangerous skill wasn't cruelty, it was her ability to erase. She didn't bring up Brenna. Not a word. Didn't ask if I had slept well. Just passed the butter and said, we should go to dinner tonight. I made reservations. I stared at her. Waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. Just a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Is this a peace offering? I finally asked. She tilted her head. Is that a problem? I wanted to say yes. That it was a problem. That you don't get to gaslight someone for years and then serve pancakes like it makes up for emotional vandalism. But I didn't. Because a part of me, the weak, spineless, eternally hopeful part, still clung to the idea that maybe she was trying. So we went. She chose the place we used to celebrate anniversaries. Candlelight. Low music. Fancy dishes I couldn't pronounce. It was too polished, too performative, but I played along. For once, we didn't talk about therapy or disappointment or Brenna. We just existed. Until dessert. That's when she struck. I think we should renew our vows, she said, gently stabbing a fork into creme brulee. I choked on my water. What? She shrugged. We've had a rough patch. Maybe it's time to recenter. Start fresh. I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or being manipulated. Probably both. She reached across the table, touched my hand, and said, "You're a good man, Franklin." I lost sight of that. I let the world harden me. But I want to fix this. I want us. There it was, the twist. The emotional sledgehammer. But I didn't feel relief. I felt suspicion. Because it wasn't about us. It was about control. She saw me slipping. Saw Brenna noticing. Saw the power shifting, and she was trying to reclaim it in the most dramatic, romantic way possible. Not because she loved me. But because she didn't want to lose her audience. Still, I said nothing. Just nodded. Smiled. Pretended I hadn't just seen the stage lights behind her eyes. We got home. She kissed me on the cheek. Told me to think about the vow renewal. Said she already had a venue in mind. Then she went to bed like she'd won something. But I stayed in the kitchen. Sat in the dark. And scrolled through my phone. That's when I saw it. A message. From a number I didn't recognize. She's lying to you. She's not planning vows. She's planning a setup. No name. No context. Just that. I stared at it for minutes, heart pounding. Then I replied. Who is this? 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then the screen stayed silent. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Because I suddenly had the sickening feeling that whatever game Meredith was playing, I wasn't just the prize. I was the pawn. And someone else out there knew the rules. I didn't get any more messages that night. Just that single line, she's not planning vows. She's planning a setup. The next morning, I stared at it like it was written in another language. Meredith was already gone when I woke up. Her side of the bed was cold, untouched. She'd left her wedding ring on the nightstand, not dramatically, not symbolically, just casually, like a forgotten coin. Like it didn't mean anything anymore. But that text, that meant something. I tried to rationalize it all. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was trying to stir the pot. But deep down, I knew better. Because the timing was too perfect. The vow renewal talk. The sudden shift in her behavior. The forced romance. It wasn't reconciliation, it was performance. And that message wasn't a prank. It was a breadcrumb. I didn't tell Brenna about it. Not yet. Something in me, something I didn't recognize, told me to stay quiet. Observe. For once, not run to someone for rescue. Instead, I called in sick. Took a walk. Wandered through the city like a man trying to find pieces of himself in coffee shop windows and sidewalk cracks. I ended up at the old bookstore where Meredith and I used to go on rainy Sundays. It was mostly empty now. The kind of place that smelled like forgotten paper and filtered regret. That's where I saw her. A woman in a gray trench coat. Sitting in the corner. Reading. I wouldn't have noticed her, she wasn't striking, wasn't loud, but when she looked up, I felt it. That instant recognition of someone you're supposed to know, even if you don't yet. She stood and walked over. Slid a folded piece of paper into the book I was holding, something about surviving betrayal, ironically, and whispered, "Don't let her isolate you. That's when it gets dangerous." And then she left. I didn't follow. I didn't ask questions. I just stood there holding the book like it was suddenly on fire. The paper inside said, 2 nights from now. 8 p.m. The garden room. Come alone. No name. No signature. Just that. I should have thrown it away. I should have told Meredith. I should have called the police, maybe. But I didn't. Instead, I kept the note. Folded it twice. Slid it into my wallet. Because a part of me, a part that had been ignored and humiliated and dismissed for years, was finally waking up. Not in a rebellious way. Not in a heroic way. Just in a quiet, desperate enough is enough kind of way. When Meredith came home that night, she was glowing. Smiling. Wearing perfume she hadn't worn in months. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "I have another surprise." I flinched. She noticed. "Relax. It's a good one." She led me into the living room, where a leather-bound planner was sitting on the coffee table. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, sketches of wedding venues, color samples for flowers. "I've been planning this for weeks," she said, like she expected applause. "You said it was spontaneous," I replied. She blinked. Hesitated. "Well, I meant I decided to tell you spontaneously." I nodded. Said nothing. And in that moment, she knew. She knew I didn't believe her. And I knew she was watching me more closely than ever. That night, she crawled into bed beside me like nothing had changed. Whispered, "I want us to feel like we used to." But we weren't us anymore. We hadn't been in a long time. She curled into my chest like a puzzle piece that didn't fit anymore. I stared at the ceiling and counted every second until her breathing slowed, until the weight of her slipped into sleep. And then, silently, I got out of bed. Walked to the guest room. Closed the door. I pulled the note out of my wallet. Held it under the lamp. 2 nights. 8 p.m. The garden room. Come alone. I didn't know who sent it. Or why. Or what I was walking into. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of not knowing. I was afraid of staying where I was. 2 nights passed like wet cement drying around my ankles. Every glance from Meredith felt rehearsed. Every touch came with a question buried beneath it. She started acting sweet again, overcorrecting, like she was trying to reset the script before I noticed what was off. But I already had. I'd noticed everything. The way her texts were suddenly locked behind a new passcode. The way she smiled too long when talking about our fresh start. The way she stared at me when she thought I was asleep. She wasn't loving me again. She was managing me. And I was done being managed. So when 8 p.m. arrived, I didn't tell her I was going for a walk. I didn't leave a note or a lie. I just slipped out the door and let the quiet swallow me. The garden room was an old event space tucked behind a church that hadn't hosted a congregation in years. I'd been there once, for a community trivia night Meredith forced us to attend. She left halfway through because she said the people smelled like desperation and mothballs. It looked different at night. Dimly lit from the inside. A single lamp post flickering near the gate. My heart was pounding in my throat, like it knew something I didn't. I stepped inside. There was no crowd. No confrontation. Just a table near the back. And at it. Brenna. I froze. She looked up. Calm. Composed. No smile this time. I thought you might not come, she said. I almost didn't. She nodded. But you did. That's something. I sat down across from her, still waiting for the punchline. The trap. The explanation. You sent the message? I asked. No. But I know who did. She slid a folder across the table. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were printed emails. Screenshots. A few grainy photos. Receipts. The air left my lungs. It was Meredith. Coordinating with a man named Jared. Someone I'd never met. Someone she'd been meeting for months at a hotel listed under spa appointments in her calendar. The emails were explicit. Not in a physical sense, nothing graphic, but emotionally undeniable. One of them read. He's soft. Predictable. He'll never question me. Once the vow renewal is over, I'll have access to the new account. The new account was the one I'd opened recently. For our supposed fresh start. The one she pushed me to put in both our names. The one where my inheritance from my late uncle had been transferred 2 weeks ago, $113,000. Another message, this one from her to Jared. Brenna's getting too close. I might have to cut her off if she doesn't back down. She's always had a thing for him. It's pathetic, really. My vision blurred. Everything, the therapy ambush, the dinner, the sudden vow renewal, the ring on the nightstand, it wasn't love. It wasn't healing. It was preparation. Why are you showing me this? I whispered. Brenna looked at me, and this time, her voice wasn't sharp. It was tired. Because I couldn't keep watching you get eaten alive. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I thought you'd defend her. I thought you'd do what you always do, say sorry for things that aren't your fault. She wasn't wrong. I sat there for what felt like an hour, rereading the same lines, the same evidence, over and over, hoping they'd change. Hoping it was a misunderstanding. But the truth didn't flinch. It just sat there on the paper, unapologetic and heavy. I wasn't in a marriage. I was in a con. And the worst part? I still loved her. Even in that moment, even with the betrayal leaking out of the folder, I felt a deep, humiliating ache that wanted it not to be true. That wanted her to walk through the door and tell me it was all fake. A prank. A mistake. But she didn't. She never came. Brenna finally stood. You don't have to do anything tonight. But don't go back to being who you were. Please. If not for you, then at least for the man you used to be before she broke him. She left me there with the folder and a check she'd already paid for. And I sat. In that empty room. Surrounded by chairs, quiet, and the truth I could no longer pretend not to know. When I got home, Meredith was watching TV in her robe, eating grapes. "You okay?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. I nodded slowly. "Just needed air." She smiled. "Good. You've seemed clearer lately." I smiled back. "Yeah. I think I finally am." And I meant it. Because the next part wouldn't be about begging her to love me. It would be about watching what happens when someone finally stops playing the role they were written into, and starts rewriting the ending. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't scream or throw things or demand answers. I just watched her, the way she curled her legs under her robe, popped grapes into her mouth like she hadn't spent months engineering the collapse of our marriage. She laughed at something on TV, unaware that I'd seen behind the curtain. And I let her laugh. Because it would be the last time she'd do it from that couch. The next morning, I did everything as usual. Made coffee. Fed the cat. Took a shower. Kissed her cheek before she left for her Pilates class, though now I knew exactly where she was really going. But as soon as the front door shut, I moved. I had already transferred the money out of the joint account the night before. The account she'd been planning to siphon from once the vow renewal distracted me. I'd already called my lawyer. Already packed the essentials. Already set the wheels in motion. I left the house without looking back. I didn't leave a dramatic note. Just a simple envelope on the kitchen table, labeled, "I know." Inside, I placed a copy of the emails, the photos, and a signed letter stating I'd filed for divorce. I didn't threaten her. Didn't insult her. Just told her I hoped one day she'd understand the difference between control and love. And then I walked away. I moved into a small rental house 2 towns over, nothing fancy, but peaceful. For the first few days, I kept expecting a phone call. Or an angry voicemail. Or a visit. But none came. Just silence. And you know what? For the first time in years, silence felt good. Brenna texted me a week later. Just a smiley face and a photo of a sunrise. I replied with a thank you. Nothing more. I didn't need to rush into anything. For once, I was okay just being still. I've started to rediscover things. I play piano again. I read without glancing at the clock. I cook badly and laugh about it. I don't apologize for being soft. I don't shrink myself in rooms anymore. I even started going to therapy, my own idea this time. Meredith didn't show up to the divorce hearing. Just signed the documents and mailed them in. No messages. No closure. And oddly enough, I was okay with that too. Because the closure wasn't her responsibility. It was mine. And I found it, not in revenge, not in confrontation, but in finally choosing myself. So, to everyone listening on Reddit Confessions. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you stopped playing the role someone else wrote for you, and finally started living as your real self? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Maybe it wasn't about a relationship, maybe it was a job, a friendship, or even just a small choice that changed everything. Drop it below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more real-life stories every week here on Reddit Confessions. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one.